We have an absolute legend in the business coming on today, John Sterling. We're so happy to have him join us, the Yankee broadcaster for 36 years, streak of 5,000 plus games in a row from 1989 to 2019. Such a creative artist, and we really appreciate him joining us. Wasn't easy. We sent our crack tech expert, Tommy Hogan, out to New Jersey to hook him up, get him a computer, figure it out, and we will have John Sterling on the show later. We also have Mike Vaccaro. Joel Sherman, still in London, was there with the Mets, and he spent an extra couple days there. So I'm sorry if you're tuning in for Joel Sherman, not here today. Mike Vaccaro is here, and Mike knows John Sterling very well. Welcome to the show, Mike, and what do you think about John Sterling being here today with us?
Thanks, John. It's a privilege to pinch hit for Joel. I'll try and be Manny Mota in that role, at least.
Very good.
What can you say about John Sterling? I mean, he's such a wonderful person, has such a decorated career. He's been doing it for 64 years and walked away on his own terms a couple of weeks ago. And it's just going to be a lot of fun to pick his brain and pick his memory bank.
Sterling will definitely be the highlight of this show, but we're going to talk a little bit of Mets, a little bit of Yankees. Mike had a nice column on the Mets today. I think it was pretty nice. We'll see what he has to say about it. So we're going to talk a little Mets, a little bit Yankees on the show with Jon Heyman and Mike Vaccaro. Mike subbing for Joel Sherman, but John Sterling will be up later, and that will be a big one. So happy to have Mike Vaccaro with us to talk about the Mets and the Yankees. This will be a treat. Mike had a great column in the Post today. It gave me a little bit of hope, a little bit of optimism. I don't know if you intended it that way. You're jumping on my bandwagon.
Yeah.
I'm the only one who said the Mets are making the playoffs. I ultimately may end up looking not so great on that. They certainly went on a losing streak right after I did that. But you pointed out that they have a good schedule coming up and they may do it. So did I read that right, or am I being too optimistic?
Yeah, no. Look, I mean, they're in a place this season where they're 8 games under 500, and yet there's still a reason to think they could make the playoffs. They're only 3.5 games out of the wild card. They have a bunch of teams to jump, but it's only June, so you can jump those teams. And they have a schedule in front of them with 33 of the next 35 games. You know, you would classify as winnable because they're against teams that are at least they're at 500, below 500. They have 2 games against the Yankees, which obviously will be an interesting challenge, but that's the Subway Series, so all bets are off. And look, if they're going to do anything this season, it's going to happen now. They've had kind of a tougher schedule than some. They face the Braves a lot, the Phillies a lot. I mean, there's none of those teams now, you know, right through the All-Star break and just to the other end of it. There's a lot of games against the Nationals and the Marlins. You would think that if they're going to get things turned around, they'll be able to beat teams like that. They'll be able to beat teams slightly ahead of them in the standings, the wild card standings, like the Pirates and the Cubs and the Padres. And look, I'm not saying they're going to go, 31-4 in this stretch, but I am saying that, a positive momentum right now across these 35 games not only vaults them back into a genuine conversation, but probably makes it a more difficult choice for Steve Cohen and David Stearns as to what they're going to do at the trade deadline. And I get it. There's a certain element of, last year, I mean, everybody gets excited when you get these kids, never know what they're going to be and so on and so forth. And it wasn't, look, as great a players as Verlander and Scherzer are, they weren't, they didn't have great accomplished careers with the Mets. So it was easy to probably part with them. A lot harder than it might be with some of the players they'll part with now. But look, when it comes down to it, nobody wants to just mail in August and September. I don't care who you are, players, ownership, GMs, fans, certainly. And look, I mean, as much as fans wanted to talk themselves into, well, this was the right thing to do last, July 31st, it was tough to watch the last 2 months. And, it's especially tough to watch because, look, and I'm not saying the Mets are as good as the Phillies, certainly not this year. But the last 2 years, the Phillies have risen from that play-in series. And 2 years ago, got to within 2 games of winning a championship. And last year, really by right should have been in the World Series again. And they were a wild card team, and it's a reminder that all you got to do is get in, and funny things happen in October. Now,
go ahead.
Yeah, so all that said, all I'm saying is that right now, if you're going to have any kind of hope left for the Mets, it's going to happen across the next month to 5 or 6 weeks.
Well, that's a great stat. 33 out of 35 against losing teams. The only 2 games against winning teams are the Yankees. I got to press you on this a little bit more. Yes, this is a key time. obviously they haven't done it to this point. Really, nobody is having not only a career year. I'm not even sure I could pick an all-star on this team at this point. I guess it'd be Alonso, but I'm not sure that anyone really stands out as an all-star. And that bullpen, which started out fine, has become a disaster. I mean, to have 6 blown leads, 8th inning leads blown, with no other team even having half that many. They're in a bad way, but to me, I'm reading between the lines and hoping you're joining me. What do you think? Are they going to make it, or are we going to see another trade-off? You did point out that Steve Cohen, very competitive, not going to want to do a trade-off again.
It's going to be against his nature to want to trade off again 2 years in a row. I know it. I don't think he was prepared for the backlash last year. As much sense as it all made, just waving the white flag at the end of July is not the way he's built. It's not the way. Look, I mean, New York City teams should never do that. Neither should LA teams, even though the Angels are obviously, in a similar boat. I mean, these big market teams should be in a position to be able to maintain a sense of competitiveness through the whole years. And look, I mean, I get the Yankees are a whole different monster, but every single year, even the Yankees' so-called bad years, they're there. I mean, last year might have been a stretch. They were on the periphery. But they got hot at some point in September, and you were like, well, if this happens, that happens. And that's really what you want as a fan. And I think that's what the Mets fans really yearn for, even the angry ones. And I mean, I understand their anger. It's justified. It's justifiable. But I think what they would, like, as angry as they are, if we get to the other side of this and at the beginning of August, the team is still intact and they're saying in the 3rd wild card position, and then you have 2 months to play for that, I think the fans would actually be receptive to that. And look, I mean, I actually look at, I'm not going to say it's an advantage. I mean, I think one of the things that you look at, and you mentioned the almost unbelievable number of blowing 6 leads after 8 innings in a month's time. If you look at it a certain way, if they only would have won 4 of those games, that's not a lot to ask to go 4-2 with a lead after 8 innings. I mean, they've got the pole position for the wild card just by doing that. But also, I think part of the reason why they were so bad is because Edwin Diaz was so bad. And look, if Diaz comes back and he's the same guy he was over the first 2 months of the season, then forget about it. Lights out. You're not going to be able to cobble it together without a reliable closer like that. If he's found something during this time off and he comes back and he resembles more Edwin Diaz of 2022 and less Edwin Diaz of 2019, then I think you also have a conversation.
Real quick, 1-word answer. Are they a seller or not? And then we'll go on to the Yankees.
Unfortunately, I think they will be a seller.
All right. Well, I'm alone. I remain alone as the lone optimistic Mets supporter. Let's go on to the Yankees. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes to go. What are your thoughts? I mean, everything is coming up great. I know they lost 2 out of the 3 to the Dodgers. Anyone could do that. But, I mean, best record in the American League. It's really them and the Phillies that have been the best 2 teams by far. I mean, I'm not going to start comparing them to the 98 Yankees, 61-27. But, I mean, are they this good? And is there anything that you see that they need right now? You got 1 minute. We got 1 minute on the clock.
They could use it anything. Oh, guess what? Garrett Cole's about ready to come back.
Right.
So you're talking about everything coming up roses. Look, you watch this team day after day, and they're just a very good team. And I thought in a lot of ways what happened on Monday night against the Royals just kind of exemplifies it. Give a couple guys the day off. They go with the B team for most of the team and in the bullpen, and they still have found a way to win. A lot of small ball, a lot of sacrificing, a lot of stuff that makes old-time Yankees fans smile because that's the way Billy Martin would have done it. And, to me, I mean, to be able to win on a number of different in a number of different ways, they can beat you with pitching, they can beat you with, an offensive onslaught. That 1-2 punch of Soto and Judge when they're healthy is just something else to watch. And they rank with every 1-2 punch you want to list, even if you want to go crazy and talk about Ruth and Gehrig, at least in terms of the raw numbers. So there's not a lot to find fault with, John. There really is not.
They look pretty good. I'm a little worried about Rizzo and Glaber right now, but other than that, I mean, the pitching, fantastic. They look great. Good job. Nice wrap up. You did that in a minute, just as I asked for, and I appreciate that, Mike. And you are good in front of the mic, but we have a legend in front of a mic coming up. John Sterling will be with us, and we are so excited to have him. Yankee legend, Jon Sterling, coming up. We are so pleased to have a legend in the business, Jon Sterling, with us today. So exciting, one of our great guests. And we're known for great guests, and this is one of our best. And I'm really, really, really excited to get going with Jon and to see what he's up to these days. Jon Sterling, 64 years behind a microphone, 36 years as the Yankee broadcaster, radio broadcaster. I think he worked 5,000 something games in a row. He can tell us, he knows exactly what the streak was, but it was like a double Ripken. He's like a 2 times Cal. So one of the great baseball broadcasters and sports broadcasters of all time. So happy to have you, Jon.
Well, thank you for all the kind words. About the streak, I feel on this podcast, I can tell you what I really think. I started my streak on November 1st or 2nd, whatever, 1981 with the Hawks. I never missed a game with the Hawks and the Braves, and I only missed 2 with the Yankees from 1989 to 2019. However, the 2 games I missed were because my sister passed away, and I had to bury her. And so I don't call that missing games. I call that a death in the family. So actually, I didn't miss a game from the beginning of 81 until mid-July of 2019. Now, having said that, you can say to me, well, what does it mean? Nothing. It means nothing.
Well, it meant something to us, and it certainly meant something to Yankee fans. And it is over 5,000 with the Yankees, and probably another 2,000 to 3,000 if you count all the Hawks games too, which they should be counted, and the Braves, right? You do all the Braves games as well. So when I ask right up front, what are you doing now? I know you said you were going to be watching all the Yankee games, even the Met games. Is that what you do with your time, or do you have something else planned?
No, I have a great life. I knew it was going to happen this way. I showed your producer engineer my setup inside where I have 2 screens. And no, I watch every game, every basketball game, every hockey game, and every baseball game, obviously. And when fall comes around, every football game. So, that's what I do. That's what I like, and that's what I do.
Jon, what's it been like for you? I know so many Yankees fans, grew up listening to you, and they know what they know about the Yankees because of you. And I know you must have heard a lot of responses from these people who have listened to you for so many years. What's that been like the last couple of weeks and months, hearing from people telling you how much you've meant to them in their lives?
Well, I made mention on that day that they honored me at the stadium. I made mention that I wanted to thank the fans, because for 36 years, everywhere I go, people say the nicest things to me and treat me with such respect. So the fans, hey, look, there wouldn't be sports. We wouldn't have jobs if fans didn't go to the games and watch on TV and listen on radio. And so I owe an awful lot to those fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost all of them loved hearing you, and you loved doing it. And I think that's why people were surprised. And I know you're doing fine, but I'd like to hear you say exactly what happened, because it was a little bit sudden. People were not expecting you to leave. Yeah, it was sudden. So what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I really knew it in my heart. I should have announced it, in spring training or before spring training. I figured I'd give it a shot. I was going to do a limited schedule, maybe 100 games, 110 games or whatever. And, I just found it very tough to keep going to the ball games. And my boss, the general manager, terrific guy, Chris Olivero, it's so nice to me. I think I could have worked out where I would do just home games. But, I didn't want to get up every day and shave and shower and look beautiful to broadcast the game. So I'm very much happier this way. I have no problems. I have no worries about, I want to do it now, or no, I'm fine. Everything is good. And people did worry that there was something physically wrong with me. And that's untrue, completely untrue. People printed it in the internet. Not that I look at the internet. I don't have the opportunity. I don't have the ability to. But people told me that it was out there that, maybe he's really sick. That's not the case at all.
Which is great to hear.
I mean, hey, listen, July 4th is a month away, less than a month away. I'm going to be 86. Don't you think that's time? My goodness.
I'll sign up.
I started, if you're wondering, I started February 1st, 1960, right near where Vaccaro went to school. He went to St. Bonnie's,
Yep.
and I got a job on a station in Wellsville.
I know Wellsville.
$60 a week.
Whoa.
John, I can say I'll sign up to look like you when I'm 66. Forget about 86.
And sound like him too.
Sound like you too.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
John,
fortunate.
I remember having a conversation with Derek Jeter in his last year playing. And he said one of the coolest things for him, when he drives around, drives to work, drive by baseball stadiums, and you'll see all these kids who ape all of his mannerisms, just the way he swung the bat, the way he prepared himself in the batter's box. There's generations now of people who I know you've probably come up to you and just want to hear them say, the Yankees win, and all of your home run calls. What does that mean for you when someone comes up to you and quotes you back to you?
Well, Mike, there's my cell phone, my contact with the outside world. Can we just let that play? It'll be off in a moment.
Yeah, it's fine.
I just lost my train of thought. Mike, I do nothing but read. That's one of the things I do. And I've read every Bob Hope book. And Hope, when they had the radio show starting in the mid-30s, they threw things out there that meant nothing. They just filling time. And then during the week, they would hear those words come back, and they knew they had something. So it obviously makes you feel good if people yell Yankees win, and high, far, and gone, and all that, Robbie Cano, don't. But there's no question that then it's gone over and become part of what I do. So how could you knock that? So it makes me feel very good.
I feel a little bad asking this question because this is such a small piece of your announcing, which was outstanding. Every aspect of it was outstanding. But I'm going to ask about the home run call. Robbie Cano, don't you know? My daughter was 10 years old at the time. She went around saying Robbie Cano, don't you know? And she's a Mets fan. Which one? I know Burn Baby Burn was the first one. I believe that's true. Where did you get the inspiration originally from this, and which one was your favorite?
Well, it has to do with the way I broadcast from the seat of my pants. I also live that way too, really, by the seat of my pants. I don't really plan anything out. So I was doing that way before, Islander Goal, and Bernard Sky, BB King, and certainly in Atlanta, Dominique is magnifique. That was a big thing, and he loved it. So I do things like that. Why? I don't know. It comes out of me. Okay, I'm not a very straight announcer. I do a few things a little off, or in many cases, a lot off. And Burn Baby Burn was the first of the Yankee home run calls, and then it just went on from there. It never was expected to be one for every person, and having to do it one for every person drove me crazy.
Yeah, it had to be. I went and looked at a list. It's several hundred. There were guys. I had no recollection of them being Yankees, and they had home run calls. It's amazing.
Yeah, it worked out. You certainly have to admit that. It's funny. Some people look on it as, it's a bit much or over the top. I hear that term all the time, but it's supposed to just make people smile or chuckle, or it's not a big thing, but it really worked.
John,
and obviously the Yankees win worked as well.
Yes.
John, it's obvious the impact and influence you had on younger broadcasters. The night you retired, Brendan Burke had a wonderful tribute to you, doing Islander Goal when the Islanders scored a goal. I know Wayne Randazzo also paid tribute to you that night doing a game in California. When you were coming up, who were some of the voices that you modeled yourself after?
Well, when I was a kid, obviously Mel Allen. I loved the Giant broadcaster, a guy named Russ Hodges. He did different things on the air too that I liked. Harvey Haddix once pitched a great game against the Giants. And at the end of the game, they go to a Mel Allen or Russ Hodges on camera. In Mel's case, in the early days, he used to pour Ballantine into a glass. And I mean, he would throw it down. Do you think that sold any Ballantine beer? But then they came up with a thing you couldn't drink on the air. But that really happened. I loved Marty Glickman. I listened to him. He was on all the time on different games. I don't know. It was a block program station where they had different elements. It wasn't one format. And I tune in as a little boy at night, and Marty would be somewhere broadcasting a game. So I loved it. But I would, to get this in, the guy who helped me the most, who I really took some thoughts from, was the basketball broadcaster of the Baltimore Bullets, Jim Carvelis. And he educated me in rhythm and pace and things like that. So I'll tell a story. Do we have time here?
Yes.
By all means.
Sure.
Well, the first game I ever did live was about the most exciting day of my life. The Bullets were playing in Boston the year after Russell retired, so Boston wasn't good either. And Carvelis got a TV golf gig, so he was away, and it was my game, just mine, my first one that was all mine. And we went up in Boston, and I never had a better time in my life. So Carvelis comes home, and he says to his wife, Lori, first of all, I was like Uncle John to their kids. I mean, I was like part of their family. And he said, how did John do? And Lori said, I think he did very, very well. And Jim said, well, what did he sound like? And she said, well, he sounded like you. And Carvelis said, well, that's not so bad. But anyway, he was a great role model for me.
You were obviously great as a Yankee announcer, but you were fortunate too. I mean, you started with a team that wasn't very good. They brought in your friend from the Braves, Joe Torre, and the team went from good to fantastic. So, I mean, what's your favorite memory of your 36 years with the Yankees? Was it 96, 98, something that happened in either of those years or something else?
Yes, no. The 1996 is my favorite year by far, and Suzyn's as well. And we were very close to Buck, but they fired him, and Joe got the job. So I have a friend who gets the job, and they weren't expected to do anything. They were not a great team, but they managed to win in wonderful fashion through the year. They held first place for 5 months. And then in the postseason, every game they won, they had to come from behind in the late innings. So, and obviously the 3 games in Atlanta were phenomenal. That'd be my favorite moments.
Jon, you were partners with all of our mutual friend Michael Kay for so many years. In fact, you broke him into the radio business really when he first got the job with the Yankees. What does it mean to you to see what he's done as a baseball broadcaster all these years later?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. We did auditions with a few people. And what I told the people at ABC, they had the rights then, Cap Cities, I told them about a movie. I can't think of the movie. Anyway, it was a movie about the Nazi years. And James Cagney was the principal. And they have all these aspirants for the OSS, which is the name before, but was the name before of that group, Wild Bill Donovan's group. And so Cagney is up on the balcony with the guy who headed the force, Walter Abel. And he said, well, it looks like a good group of people, blah, blah, blah. And Walter Abel said, Yes, except one is a Nazi. And Cagney said, well, which one? And he said, no, I want you to find that out. And obviously he did. It was an actor named Richard Conte, who was a very good actor who was playing that part. And anyway, that's what I told ABC. I said, I know the guy, but I want you to come and tell me who you think it should be. I know him already. And it was Michael. And, Mike, he was great right away because he's so bright and was able to introduce subjects in my color. I was only doing a couple of innings. So he had to learn how to do play-by-play. He had to learn how to, play-by-play rhythm, yada, yada, yada. On TV, there's much less that you have to do. And you know what? He was great. He was great right away. We got along famously right away. And I thought, it was a pretty good broadcast.
Well, your longest running partner has been Suzyn Waldman, we all know very well. And it seems like you guys have been very close for a long time. Tell me about your relationship with Suzyn. When did it start? How did it develop?
Well, WFAN had an afternoon guy named Pete Franklin, and he had a heart attack. And the general manager or program director of FAN was a guy named John Shannon. I worked for him with Enterprise. And he said, why don't you come up and do the show during the All-Star break? You have a few days. We'll put you up. And my first day, I'm doing the show, and my update gal is Suzyn Waldman. That was 1987. So we've been best buddies since then. And as a broadcaster, she's fabulous. What she is a reporter. And she will get the job done. She will get the story. Nothing's going to stop her. One thing I would say about Michael and Suzyn and myself, we're all self-starters. We don't need someone to pat us on the back. Go out there and be great today. It's my phone again, which goes all day long.
That's good to hear.
Anyway, she's a great, great reporter. And it worked perfectly with me, because she was telling things that I didn't know and the audience didn't know. So I thought our partnership was terrific.
Jon, what was it like? I mean, you spent many years with George Steinbrenner, ultimately as your most critical listener. And I'm sure he probably had a few things to say to you through the years. What was it like knowing that he was, even if he wasn't listening, he was always listening?
Well, I was wondering if you were going to ask me about George. And I'm glad you did. I'll give you a few George stories. Now, the thing is, I know George was very tough on other people. And he was very tough. Not with me. We're in Fort Lauderdale in a hotel in 1989, my first year. And it's Sunday evening, and, I'm going to meet people for drinks and dinner, that kind of thing. And I get on the elevator, and who's on the elevator? George. And so we ride a little bit, and then George turns to me and says, in true George fashion, I want you to know, I always wanted you to do Yankee games. Well, wow, thank you. Thank you, Then a couple of years later, it was on a Sunday, and I made a point on the air. The Yankees were lousy. Really, my first few years, they were terrible. And I did a thing on the air. They keep knocking George and his general manager de jour. And I said, why don't they knock the players? They're the ones who aren't hitting. They're the ones who aren't pitching. So a few days later, we're in Milwaukee, and there's a rain delay. And on ABC, they had a talk station, so they had someone ready to go on the air. So I'm wandering around doing nothing, just eating up time. And I go by a little booth where George is sitting. Now, this is the old Milwaukee Stadium. This is bare bones. I mean, that's, and George sees me walk by and he says, Jon, I just want to tell you You'll always be the Yankee announcer. I figured he heard what I said Sunday. You'll always be the Yankee announcer. And if they try to replace you, I'll veto it. My final great George story is after the Yankees lose in 95 in that gut-wrenching great playoff series against Seattle. I mean, the games were fabulous. The Kingdome was fabulous. Obviously, the stadium was too. Anyway, they lost in extra innings. And the only way to get to the bus was to go through the dugout on into the field, and the bus is out in center field. And the only one on the field is George. And the steam, the proverbial steam, is coming from his ears. And I walked by him, and he said to me, "Don't worry, there'll be changes. Not you and Michael. You guys are great."
That's a great story.
Those are my George stories.
That's awesome.
So he was awfully good to me and awfully good to Suzyn.
Well, it's great to hear George was good to you, and certainly the fans love you. But obviously New York is a tough town, and there's TV critics everywhere. So I got to ask you, some of the TV critics haven't been on your side. How have you dealt with that? I know you go buy the newspaper still, so we thank you for that. You're not an internet guy, but you still get the newspaper.
Oh my goodness, I'm a newspaper junkie.
Good for you. You're the one. Do you read them, and does it upset you when they write not such great stuff? And I am not with them, by the way. I'm not a TV critic, but
well, at the beginning, the two people, one in the news, one in the Post, were killing me every day. And the program director of WABC was a guy named John Manelli. And John Manelli was one of those guys, I'm sure you've met him, who didn't know anything about team sports. I mean, if you said, this is a basketball, wait a minute, you're going to. And John Manelli, who knew nothing. I heard a story like this. I wonder if you've heard it. John Lindsay had to go to the Mets games. They were the world champs in '69, and politicians go there to look like they're part of the team. So Lindsay went there, and they told me he didn't know anything. I mean, anything. And they had to point out, that's first base. That's second base. I mean, so John Manelli was one of those guys. And he said to me, "You ought to call both those guys and thank them. The only thing people remember is your name. They don't remember anything else." So, you take it and move right along. Now, I'm very tough internally. You can't get me. I take care of myself and do it very well. And, I'm able to, I guess I'm able to brush those things aside. If I saw those two people, I wouldn't talk to them because they want to. There was a gal at MSG who was their promotion director. I can't think of what her name was, Kara. And my wife was ready to give birth to triplets. Can you imagine? The voice of the Yankees, and he's having triplets. It's a good yarn, a good story, So this gal, Kara, called up both guys and said, if you'd like to use this, John and his wife, Jennifer, are going to have triplets, blah, blah, blah. And they said, no way. They wouldn't use it. So that's kind of telling you how they felt. And forget about, they're doing their job, but that's how they feel inside. And you know what? Hasn't bothered me at all. My kids are grown. I got them all through college. Yay. And they're all good kids and like that.
John,
I haven't given you a good answer, have I?
No, I like that answer. I liked it. I think that was a great answer.
John, okay. Do you ever have occasion, I don't know, if you're watching the Yes Network and a Yankee Classic comes up and they're using the radio broadcast of you and Michael? I mean, do you ever pause, listen, and, almost self-critique your work at all?
I told this to Filippelli. I said, when I've listened to the Yankee Classics and you hear Michael and I, it sounds perfect. You wouldn't know that it was radio. You would think it's TV. Everything is covered. So I kind of like that.
I want to ask you about they're having tryouts now to fill your position. And one of the people who's trying out is Ricky Ricardo, who reportedly saved you during I believe it was a hurricane, some kind of natural disaster. Are you rooting for the guy who saved your life, or are you staying out of it? How does that work? And what do you think about these tryouts?
Sure. I'm staying out of it.
Yeah. Okay.
No, really. I don't want to hurt one person for another. I think the kids are doing a great job. No problems. Ricky, the incident was there was an unbelievable amount of rain, and because I'm a jerk, I try to drive through it, and I did till I got into Edgewater, and then my car stopped, and I couldn't get out because the water was so deep, and I didn't know what to do. I called Suzyn. Suzyn called Ricky, who hadn't left yet. He does a post game, and he drove by, picked me up, and he drove to higher ground, and then we went all the way around circuitously before he finally dropped me at home. So I love Ricky for that. I think he's a terrific broadcaster, but you're right. I'm staying out of it.
Okay.
Jon, I've told you this before, but I go back with you to the Islanders days, and I was a kid, playing street hockey in West Hempstead with my buddies, and of course, whenever we scored a goal, it was an Islander goal, an Islander goal. What are your fondest memories of those years doing the Islanders and the Nets? I mean, and did you ever have a day off?
No, no, I was doing the talk show on MCA, and then the Nets and Islanders, mostly home games, but a bunch of away games. The Islander players, we've had a terrible loss of Islanders in the past year. Mike Vaccaro and Clark Gillies and Jean Potvin. It's been very tough. They were so good to me. I'll give you an example. And imagine this happening today. The answer is never. I one night walked into the Islander dressing room, and Bobby Nystrom came over to me, and he said, Jon, would you like a cup of coffee? That would never happen. That would never happen today. We were so closer to the team than they allow you to be today. They don't allow you at all today. They hold the broadcasters and media at arm's length. So my feeling is they feel they don't need them anymore. So,
well, I expected you to be delightful. You actually have been very delightful, and you seem like you're very, very happy. So needing to follow up on the original question that I asked, which is, the fact that you retired rather suddenly. Do you have any regret at all? Do you feel very happy? Do you think you made the right call to retire when you did?
Yeah, I don't want to travel anymore. I did a show for FAN, and the people were phenomenal, just phenomenal. So we're going to talk about maybe doing a show. Then all I have to do is go down to FAN and go in the studio, sit down, and then leave after it's over. So I might do that. So, I probably haven't retired fully, but maybe.
I'm sorry, Jon.
I was going to follow up with one. Sorry. I mean, you could have stayed, though, right? I mean, the Yankees would have said, do your limited schedule, do the home games, and you could have done them, right?
I didn't have the strength to get there every day.
Okay, fair enough.
And I know what I'm doing, and think how lucky I am that I was gainfully employed for 64 years. Isn't that something? I can't believe it. And it all began, Mike, in Wellsville, New York.
All good things happen on the Southern Tier, Jon.
Right, absolutely. Along with Genesee beer, have a Jenny. I love that. It was so exciting for me. I wanted to be on the air, and I got on the air, and here it is 64 years later, almost 65.
Jon, you're talking about WFAN just now. I mean, back in the day, I don't want to say you invented sports talk radio, but you were certainly one of the pioneers in New York of sports talk radio. What was that like, and what do you think when you see what's become, for better and for worse, I mean, both highs and lows of talk radio in this town?
Well, see, I was in Baltimore. I really go back. I mean, you guys weren't born. I was in Baltimore doing a general talk show, which I hated. I didn't know what I was talking about. And the thing about doing a general talk show, nothing ever ends. And here it is 2024, and there are a million problems. But every Friday, usually, I put in sports. And I started getting a sports rep, and I was, super buddies with Carvelis and Kevin Lockery and Bob Ferry and Gene Shue. So I had all these people kind of on my side, and I started getting into sports. And then I landed the MCA thing. I had landed Morgan State football before it. And so all of a sudden, I'm doing what I should have been doing, a sports talk show in New York. And, I loved it.
Well, you were absolutely fabulous at that. I know when I was in, I'm sorry to pull rank and, act like I'm a young person here, but I think I was in junior high school or maybe even grade school, and I called you and asked you about the gag line. And for people who don't recall that, that was, I believe, Rattel, Hadfield, and Gilbert. And you were very kind to me. I was probably 12 years old or maybe 14. I'm not sure. It was so long ago, but very nice. So I want to thank you for that. And you did do a great talk show. And you are one of the greatest baseball radio people ever, and right up there with Harwell and all the rest. And you should be in the Hall of Fame. We didn't ask you about the Hall of Fame, but I'll just say you should be in the Hall of Fame. And yes, absolutely.
Well,
and
if it happens, I'll be happy. And if it doesn't happen, see, I have a thing about this is my only life, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I enjoy every day. I have wonderful kids. We have a family where everybody loves everybody. There are no problems. And that's without the Hall of Fame. You can't see it, but I have a desk over there which is filled with Hall of Fames and 13 Emmys and all that jazz. And I never look at it. I mean, that happened, so I'm very happy with things, very happy.
Well, we're very happy that you're happy, and I think the Yankee fans are very appreciative of the last 36 years. A brilliant announcing job, so much fun. That's what it should be about. It should be about fun, and you certainly had fun, and you made the games fun, and you made this interview fun, and we're really appreciative that you get. I asked for 20 minutes, and I think we went over 30 minutes, and we really appreciate it. And get back to your reading and your watching of all the games.
Yeah, I am reading a book, the most phenomenal book. It's Observations about D-Day from the people who were in D-Day. It's a brand new book, and I'd have the name of it. Would you give me that book, Tommy? I'll give you the name.
Very good.
And I want to say something about Mike Vaccaro. Having lived so long and been in the game so long, I love going back and thinking of old things. Mike Vaccaro is absolutely the best at going back and finding things. He's not that old. I don't know how he knows all these things. Things that I know. He writes about Carl Braun and Harry Galton and Dickie McGuire. I mean, you get the idea. So I wanted to say that to Mike. And of course, I read a book that he wrote about the 1912 World Series. About as great a baseball book as I've ever read in my life. It's phenomenal. Anyway, so thanks to both of you. Jon Heyman, by the way, who's on this podcast, he was on the air live with me in the early days. You remember that?
Yes, I was your confrere in 1990. The Yankees were terrible, but you had a great attitude, much better than my attitude. And I was young and probably writing some bad stuff, not about you, but about the team. And you were very, very upbeat about it, even when they were winning. I don't know what they won that 1990 season. It was 60 games. I don't know, 65 or something like that. And you always had a great attitude, and you carried that for the next 35 years. So just an amazing job. Certainly 35 years, great job, and great job with this podcast. And we really want to thank you for coming on.
Okay, my pleasure. And anytime you want me, just give a call.
Okay,
thank
terrific. You. All right, Jon. Great.
Oh, wait, I didn't give you the name.
Oh, yeah. We have to plug the book.
What a fool I am. When the Sea Came Alive, an oral history of D-Day written by a guy named Garrett Graff. And if you get this book, you'll never put it down. You can't wait to read more, Anyway.
Right. Well, we just
Anyway, thank you.
80th anniversary, June 6th. Now, your anniversary or birthday is next month, and you are, I'm sorry, are you 85 or 86?
86.
Wow.
Let's not cheat me.
Well, you have a better voice than me. You still have your hair. It's really incredible. You've done a great job.
I've been very lucky in many respects, and that's one of them. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jon. All right, the final part of the show, we do our little hitter error, and Mike Vaccaro, is your chance to have the floor and tell us whether you have a hit or an error in Major League Baseball.
I'm going to go with the error, the coming up Yankees-Red Sox series. Jon, before we started talking today, I asked you, Yankees playing the Red Sox this weekend, right? And you said yes. And it just struck me that, it wasn't that long ago that we would build our entire schedules around, the 18 or 19 Yankees-Red Sox games. You had to beat every one because you just never knew what was going to happen. And of course, they were usually 1 and 1A in terms of the best teams in baseball. And, for various reasons, that's kind of fallen off the last couple of years. The Red Sox certainly aren't nearly as engaged at the same level the Yankees have been the last couple of years since they won their last championship. And I'm sure that'll happen again because it's the Red Sox and the Yankees, and these teams tend to honor the history. But just right now, it feels like just another series, which is a little sad for me, a guy who wrote a book about the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry.
All right, since you talk Yankee-Red Sox rivalry, I'm going to give a hit, and I'm not just sucking up to my bosses. Thank you for sending me. We still care about this rivalry. I'm going with the beat writer, Greg Joyce, up to Boston, to Fenway for 3-night games. Looking forward to it, even if maybe a couple fewer people aren't. Maybe most of them in Boston. New York, we're still into it because the Yankee team is fantastic. So that's my hit for the day, and it's been a great show. Thank you so much to Mike Vaccaro for coming in, pinch hitting for Joel Sherman. Fantastic job. Thank you to John Sterling. We appreciate your having the patience to stick with us to get not your computer, our computer set up for you so that you could participate, and we really appreciate your coming on the show. I want to thank, of course, the viewers, the listeners, who's ever joining us. Again, you can see us on the New York Post YouTube page or wherever you get podcasts, whether that be Spotify or Apple. And it's been our pleasure to be here again. Thanks to Mike Vaccaro and thanks to John Sterling. We'll be wrapping up, and we'll see you back next week. And I think Joel will be back next week. Oh, and I wanted to thank, of course, Jake Brown, who does a fantastic job every week, our key producer. And of course, Tommy Hogan, Johnny on the spot, or Tommy in this case, was there to set up the computer and get it working for John Sterling so we could hear John's voice, which is still great, still way better than mine, and still got a lot of great things to say. So we will see you next week on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.